Hi everyone, welcome back to the Simply Trade News Roundup. Today is August 1st. Well, that's when we're recording. You might be listening on August 4th. And again, just to introduce myself, my name's Anik, and I have a guest on the News Roundup every time we record. And this time it's a special day because first of all, well, like I mentioned, it's August 1st and there's lots happening because today a few executive orders went out that had been talked about for weeks already. So we've been leading up, speculating what's going to happen on this day. And we're going to discuss all that today with you and with our special guest, of course. So today we have Luis Arandia. Let me know if I mispronounced that. He's an international trade partner at Barnes and Thornburg, and he is going to discuss the recent executive orders today with us and kind of what is going to happen, how are we moving forward, and what really are the changes that are occurring. So welcome, Luis. Thank you so much for being on the Simply Trade podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here. Big fan of y'all's work. And it's an exciting day in terms of just news. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. And we met just recently at the GTE conference, which was so nice. You know, sometimes I don't get to meet the people that come on the podcast, or I've never met them and I meet them later. This time it was different because we met first and here we are. And I think it's the perfect timing because it's a huge shift in the industry. And again, for news, which is funny because news sometimes don't translate to what's actually happening. So that's what we're trying to kind of disfigure to make sure that people know what is really happening and how we can move forward as best as we can. I don't know if best is the greatest word for this, but we just have to move forward, right? We can't go backwards, unfortunately. So, Luis, let me ask you. There's been a lot happening, and there's been a lot of dates throwing around, such as August 1st, August 7th. I just kind of want to dissect what's happening today. So, by the time you listen to this, August 1st would be about 4 days ahead. So you're kind of probably synced into the news and have sat with what's actually happening. But there's a few things that's going into effect today, August 1st, which first I want to address the copper situation. So we've had the steel tariffs for a while now, right? Steel and aluminum tariffs for a while. Now he decided to add copper to that. Is that on the same level as the steel and aluminum taxes? Is it treated the same? Or how can we view the executive order on the copper?
Yeah, appreciate that. So exactly right. So the authority that the White House and the president used for these copper proclamation is Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, which is the national security authority to impose tariffs, duties, or other tariff rate measures to address imports that threaten the U.S. national security. So here we have 50% duties on imports of copper from all countries of origin and some derivative products of copper because the president made a determination that the imports threaten the U.S. national security.
Yeah, I see here that exemptions apply for copper scrap and certain copper input materials to protect industry reliant on raw materials. So I'm guessing those are American companies that would be treated unfairly with this executive order.
Oh, yeah, potentially so. So yesterday afternoon, CBP released CSMS messages saying which particular HTS codes are on where are subject to 50% duties. So it's not, so Chapter 74 is copper. It's not the whole of Chapter 74. It's, some headings and subheadings thereof. So, so not all copper products are subject, just the ones listed.
So I know there was a lot of problems going on with the steel and aluminum tariffs. I feel like people still haven't figured it out completely. Do you think that'll happen with the copper, or what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think so. I'm getting all my papers here. Make sure I got my papers. Yeah, so I think so. I think there might be some confusion about how to apply the duties for these copper products. So, for example, CBP's guidance is basically 50% duties on the copper content, and then the non-copper content could be subject to other duties. So,
so stacking, we're
stacking, and how do you value copper, right? How do you assess what's the value of copper? And we've been struggling with this in the international trade compliance community because, how to prove the value of steel or aluminum derivative product, or now copper. And in the CSMS message, we have here a guidance from CBP about basically the value of copper is the total price paid or payable, basically what you paid for it. So it's proving that is going to be essential in terms of making correct declarations on the copper content that is subject to these duties.
Yeah, and I'm going to move on from copper. We could talk about this for ages, I feel like, because it's a deep topic. But thinking about that it's going to affect August 1st, which again, you guys, it's in effect right now. What should companies do at this point? I mean, if you have copper, right, in your product, you need to really understand your product and what the materials are used. But if companies have not done that correctly, or have thought about this ahead of time, do they stop shipping right now to avoid any fees later on, or what do they do if they have to evaluate this?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I think, and what I'm about to say, I think is true for all the different tariff actions happening at the same time, is that you need to get, the importer needs to get their house in order in terms of what are you importing? What is the correct tariff classification, right? Did some customs expert help you with it? Do you rely on a foreign manufacturer to help you with the classification? Number two, what's the country of origin? And then what is what is the method of appraisement for this entry? So if you have those three basic things, you can shift with all these things going on. So with respect to copper, first thing I would say is the imported merchandise on the copper list? Is it subject to this list? Because it doesn't cover everything. It's semi-finished copper and intensive copper derivative products. So is it on this list? Point number one. Number two, if it is on the list, can you assess how much copper content is in that article? And can you prove it? And if you don't know if it's on the list, or if you don't have a good sense of the value, you may want to pause and just think about that before importing, because the proclamation that was issued on July 30th does provide for strict compliance and directs CBP to issue maximum penalties for importers that underdeclare copper duties.
Okay, well, that's something everyone needs to take into consideration from now on. But copper is just a little part. It's a huge part, but it's a little part in the grand scheme of things. So we're moving on to something that is also going into effect today, August 1st, which is Canada tariffs. Yeah, that's interesting because, Mexico is not in that bracket. We have a 90-day extension. So I think there's not much to talk about Mexico, actually, because we're currently staying the same. But Canada definitely does have tariffs, which it seems, again, the goal is to pressure Canada to act more aggressively against the flow of illicit drugs, and such as fentanyl. We can look at the statistics there and question it a little bit, but there's nothing we can do. It's in effect. So we have to deal with it. But it is 25% to 35%. How is that changing from what was in place before August 1st?
Mm-hmm. So this stems from, we're calling it the IEEPA fentanyl tariffs, IEEPA fentanyl Canada tariffs. They became effective March 4th, I believe, at 25%. So from March 4th to today, the difference is there's an increase of 10% duties on goods that do not qualify as originating under USMCA. So that's the biggest difference here, is that the USMCA exemption still applies. So if a good is eligible as originating under USMCA, it's still exempt from now 35% duties. But if it's not eligible for USMCA, then now it's a 35% duty rate for that product.
There's a huge word happening right now in trade, and you please explain this. So it says here that 40% tariff imposed on goods determined to be transshipped through Canada. So it's not 35%. If it's transshipped, it's 40%. That adds another 5%. What exactly does that mean, and how? Let's just get into that first.
Yeah. So we've been trying to understand what transshipment means in the context of all these different tariff actions as found in the letters issued to countries. But now with the executive order, where we have real legal terms to analyze, this is my interpretation of transshipment. So basically, transshipment is as what CBP typically defines transshipment of, which is the false declaration of a country of origin. As an example, let's say you're shipping goods from China to Canada, and there was no substantial transformation of the goods in Canada, and then you're importing into the U.S. as Canada origin. That is a false declaration of origin because it's still technically China origin. So it's nothing new in terms of concepts. It's just an old concept of falsely declaring the country of origin. I think what's interesting about this particular Canada order is that this executive order says two things. One is all articles of Canada that Canada do not qualify as originating under USMCA and that are determined by CBP to have been transshipped is now subject to 40%. So it's kind of like a two-step process. Does it qualify for USMCA? And CBP has to make an affirmative determination that there's a transshipment, there's a false declaration of origin to evade duties owed.
So these 40% could actually only happen to people that try to ship things through USMCA? Is that like a secondary part? Because it seems like, why would you pay the 40% to begin with? Because you're not going to tell yourself we're transshipping, we're going to pay 40%. That would be very silly to do. So these
Exactly.
40% would be assigned by CBP to you, or but
That's right.
Isn't that like, this is different to me, because I feel like that would mean you're playing the system. Wouldn't that be a fee anyways? Wouldn't there be a certain you're going to jail, but you're paying a fee because you're not doing something correct. But he's giving us the out and saying you're just going to pay 40% if you're not doing it right, or what?
No, I'm not reading it that way. So I think you had it right the first thing you said. So from this executive order section and for that matter the reciprocal executive order, I am reading the transshipment sections to be something that CBP will assess on entries. Nothing that an importer can affirmably say, yeah, I'm going to transship, right?
Yeah.
Because transshipping is not good. It's falsely declaring origin.
That would be very weird.
Right. So, and also the reason why I'm saying that is because in this section of the executive order for Canada, the president is directing CBP to not allow for mitigation of penalties and any other appropriate fines and penalties and duties owed. So it's like it's a thing that's not good to happen in terms of CBP will assess the transshipment determination. Typically the way it works is if you are, say, for example, shipping goods from China to Canada and Canada to Mexico or to US, and there's no substantial transformation, then you put country of export Canada, country of origin China. That's not transshipment. That's still declaring the correct country of origin. So that wouldn't fall into this realm of transshipment. You would pay the China origin duties. So that's how I'm reading it.
How will U.S. Customs determine if goods have been transshipped through Canada? Do they already have a process in place, or because this is new?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think we're in the very early stages of this enforcement type of action. So I think what will happen is CBP will start targeting, in this case for Canada, potential Canada shipments that may not be country of origin Canada, right? They could be some other origin. One way to kind of suss this out is, okay, on the entry documentation, what is the manufacturer ID? Is it declaring something as China? That's kind of unusual if it's coming from Canada, right? So I think that's how they're going to start probably looking at it, is looking at the data. What is the data showing in terms of imports from Canada?
Okay. So that is August 1st. So that is in place now. So everyone who is from now on, from today, was this 12 a.m. August 1st? Like, is
12:01 Eastern time.
Okay. All right.
So and the CBP guidance messages went out to the trade at 10:20 Eastern.
So if you're shipping, if you're importing, and you're not paying these 35%, if it's not under USMCA, you're in trouble. Let's just say that. Okay, well, that's not it, because now we're kind of covered August 1st. Is there anything August 1st that we should be worried about? Copper, Canada? Brazil? No, not yet, right? That's
not yet, Brazil. So I think just want to make a brief note about Mexico. So even though the president announced like a 90-day pause for Mexico, the executive order currently in place for Mexico for IEEPA fentanyl, there's no end date. So it's just, I guess, an internal deadline in the White House to make revisions or modifications to the order. So, to change these tariffs, you need an executive order. So that's what happened last night with Canada. He says, we're going to do 35% Canada. We got to change within the executive order. So currently the March order for Mexico and February order for Mexico are still in effect.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll stay updated on that. Let's move on to the second most important date we have here, which is August 7th, which is just 3 days away from today when you're listening to this episode, which should be August 4th, Monday. We have a few things changing, right? There's many countries on the list whose tariffs are going up. What are the most significant countries? Because I know India, that stuck out to me, got a tariff.
Okay, so like Vietnam, for example, went from 46% to 20%. We have, what was the country you mentioned?
India
went from 26% to 25%. So not much of a difference. The European Union went from 20% to 15%, and that one's kind of a weird one. That one's going to be very difficult to enforce. And
how come?
Honestly, because it's based on the column 1 rate of duty, and the way that this reciprocal order's written is that it's a total of 50% total duty. So let's say, for example, you have a 7% MFN rate, column 1 rate for your commodity. Under this executive order, you add 8% to make a total of 15%. If the commodity has more than 50% MFN, so let's say it's 20% MFN, then there's no additional EU reciprocal rate. So it's a commodity by commodity adjustment of the rates that I think it'll be kind of hard to. I don't know how CBP will input this into ACE, because every rate's different, and not every tariff rate includes ad valorem percentages, right? So it's going to be interesting, and I think very difficult to try to get right without thinking closely about it.
So there's a lot of changes, whether the tariffs went up, whether the tariffs went down. It's not easy for a business to adjust that, because specifically if you have so many products, what is your legal advice in that sense on how to make sure that your company is safe and not making mistakes? Because I know there's a lot of room for mistakes in this case.
Absolutely. And let me first say that all these overlapping tariff actions are exceedingly complex to understand collectively. So it's not just hard for importers and brokers. It's also hard for us trade lawyers too, who are looking at this every day. and it's hard for everyone to try to understand in terms of compliance efforts. So I definitely sympathize with that. I think what I said to you at the beginning is that if you have your data as an importer, having your data is key, so that you can understand how these tariff actions are working. And again, it goes back to the three revenue pillars: classification, origin, and valuation. If you have a firm foundation, basic foundation of all those three things, then you can adjust, you can prepare for all these different changes as quickly as you can.
Luis, I'm going to have to make a pitch real quick because it's crazy that you just mentioned the three pillars, because I was just in a meeting and we just talked about the three pillars, and we combined a few of the courses, threw them into a bundle, and it's like, well, it's a learning opportunity, right, for people to kind of get into those three pillars, the three topics. And we have that on the globaltrainingscenter.com. You can find it under the on-demand library, and there's a whole bundle if you want to dive into that, because I know that's key to make sure that you're aware of what those mean. And I wasn't going to pitch this, but you literally said it. I'm sorry, I didn't know. And we just were in the meeting talking about it, so I guess it was meant to be talked about. It's just an FYI for everyone that needs to dive deeper into those. Okay, so that makes, I understand it's not easy. I think CBP is still struggling to do that. And you mentioned ACE, and I think ACE is a problem for a lot of people when things change, because they don't know how to navigate it anymore correctly, because it's such a complex system now, that, they need a tutorial on how to do it at this point,
Mm-hmm. So still plug ACE. Anytime I get new importer clients on board, I'm working with, first thing I ask for is, do you have access to your ACE data? If not, let's get you set up. There are out, consultants out there that help you get set up with ACE. Fully acknowledge that it is, it can be a challenge to navigate and run reports and all that. But CP does have training guides and I think some videos out there. So just keep with it. You'll get there. But I think if you as an importer do not have access to your ACE data right now in this environment, then you're behind the ball. You really need access to your data, see what is being entered, what are the country of origins, especially, let's say, for example, you have multiple brokers. Are the brokers entering the data as you, the importer, wants them to? Maybe it's inconsistent because the importer provided inconsistent directions. So that's why it's so important to have the ACE data, because just by pulling the reports, okay, copper just came out. Do we have anything that's on the copper list? No. Okay. Now we have country of origin. We can pull our ACE data. What are the countries of origins and what's most impacted by the reciprocal order, right? So I think it's totally critical key these days.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's great advice. I want to move on real quick to our last topic, because again, this is something we could talk about for days. I think what's happening right now, there's just so many changes, but let's address one of the big ones is also the suspending duty-free de minimis treatment for all countries, which we've seen it for China first. Now, this is August 7th, right?
No, this is August 29th.
Okay, good. Because I remember for when it went into effect for China, they gave them a big grace period to figure out what to actually do. How do you address this? Is this a huge change for companies? What are you saying to do in this change?
Yes, this is a monumental change. If you're a company that relies on de minimis imports, this is a monumental change. So let me backtrack and say that the Congress and the President signed the One Big Beautiful Bill, I think about a month ago, 2 weeks ago. And one of the provisions in there was eliminating de minimis. So the fuse on that one was July 2027. This executive order jumps up that timeline, right? So it's going to be hard to deal with this, because if you were utilizing de minimis exemptions from around the world, not China, Now what you have to do is figure out, am I classifying this right? Is this the correct value? Is this the correct country of origin? And all the other stuff. And assess our correct duties, because now you have to make informal and formal entry for all these different shipments. And then if it's through the international postal shipments, there's like a range of duty rates that can come in effect depending on the IEEPA reciprocal rate at the time of entry. So it's gonna be a challenge, and it's gonna be hard to adjust, honestly. And I was talking about this with the brokers at the GT conference. How is this going to work? Is this going to be what do you call it? Pick and ship from just a domestic warehouse? Consolidate all the shipments in one place so you can make a bigger entry instead of multiple entries. It's going to be. Fortunately, it's at the end of the month, so there's some time to kind of get it together. But if you weren't already doing this process, it's going to be hard to set up very quickly.
Yeah, and I believe there's a lot of resources you have to be put into it, so it's not cheap. I mean, you would think that, okay, the executive, or it's coming from up above, and you would think that, like let's implement it. It's like, well, there's a lot of steps you have to take, a lot of money you have to put into it, and then you pay even more money because you're not even subject to the minimis. So you're really, companies seem to suffer from this, correct? From this change a little bit.
Well, it's going to be a challenge to adjust. As you mentioned, it's going to cost more money. Customs bonds, hiring customs brokers, determining the country of origin classification. That's not easy stuff. I will say it right now. If you're going to rely on ChatGPT to get all this right, then you shouldn't do that. That's not you're exercising reasonable care there, but it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. Okay. I see that. What else was I going to? Was I going to ask something else about this? You know what? Oh, that's what I was going to say. In Europe, they don't even have the minimis. I believe that's what someone told me. Maybe I should fact check that, or whoever listens, fact check it. But I believe someone told me that they don't even have the minimis, that no goods are subject there. So, it's doable right now if I'm comparing it, but also Europe and America are very different places. So, yeah. Okay. So anyways, so there's a lot of changes happening. There's a lot of steps that companies now have to put in place to really fully comply with all the new rulings. Do you have any last words to say in terms of these changes and in terms of what's happening in the industry?
No, I think it's going to harken back to what I said. If you have if you're strong in your 3 revenue pillars: tariff classification, revenue, valuation, and origin, and have your data, then you can adjust with all the change. You can understand quickly the changes that are happening. And I do want to say a plug about Brazil, because that's happening too next week. Brazil is an additional 40% IEEPA duty rate for specific goods. And the interesting one about that executive order is that there's a list of goods that are not subject. So to see if you're subject, you have to check that first. And then if it's not there, then you're subject, and then you're subject to additional 10% for IEEPA reciprocal. So it's stacking. And,
let's just say there's going to be long nights for people in trade right now. It's not going to be easy, but we're going to get through it step by step. Again, we can't go backwards. We have to move forward, right? And we can question it as much as we want, but obviously the executive orders are in place and we have to follow them. Or if you have a few $1 million to spare, you can do that too and pay your fines, right? I'm not encouraging that.
I'm not encouraging that either.
That was sarcastic, people, please. Okay, so thank you so much for breaking down these, complex executive orders, because they're not even easy to understand, and people are still scrambling to kind of define what they actually mean. The coming week, I think, will be critical for companies to ensure compliance and just adjusting strategies, because that's what some businesses will have to do. Again, thank you guys for tuning into the Simply Trade podcast for this update and kind of discussing what's happening currently in the industry, which definitely, trade is not boring right now. Do we want it to be boring again? Yes. But unfortunately, I don't see that in the near future. So thank you so much, Luis, for coming on and sharing your expertise. And if you have any questions, you as the listener, please reach out and we can forward them to Luis, or we can forward them to people that might be able to help you. And again, training is super important. Train your staff, let them know what's going on. Make sure they're all on the same page. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on the pod.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show, or would like to sponsor Simply Trade, or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only, and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.